Okay, this is a little lecture on Charles Duhigg's How Target Knows What You Want Before You Do. And it's a chapter from, I have the book over here. Oh, sorry about that. Duhigg's Power of Habit. Terrific book, by the way, kind of fascinating. Duhigg is a long-time Pulitzer Prize winning, actually, reporter from the New York Times. And just sort of an interesting guy who finds, productivity, a lot of just sort of everyday, a lot of it can be almost interpreted as self-help, but not quite. It's an interesting sort of in-between area he sort of found himself in. He, for a little while, I think, was a war correspondent and realized that that wasn't really the life for him. But he carved himself quite a niche. Anyway, this is a book about habit. And what habits are, the effect they have on our lives, which is immense, by the way. Most of what we do is habitual, right? It's our routine, and how to really, if you want to change a habit, how to go about doing so, and essentially, by the way, there's three parts to it. So he's come up with, which is essentially there's um, a cue, which is sort of the trigger for the habits, then the habit itself, the behavior, and then a reward. And people, when they want to change habits, they focus too much on the behavior, and they don't focus enough on the cues or the rewards, and those are the things you really kind of have to work on, sort of adjusting. And sort of go, if you really want to change, especially a long-grained bad habit, go about it like a sort of science experiment, and keep tweaking, the sort of the cues and the rewards to really get the behavior. Otherwise, too many, you get tired, and you eventually, and habits have a sort of gravitational pull to them, and eventually you'll sort of revert back to mean, and before you know it, you're right back into doing, which is why it's so difficult to change. Dietary habits are notoriously difficult to change. Getting, if you don't like to exercise, getting yourself to exercise, all kinds of things, right? But anyway, a fascinating book to sort of read for that too. This particular chapter, again, is about retail and the way retail studies habits, right, and uses it to their advantage. And again, if you've ever walked into a mall store, which I'm pretty sure all of you have, the grocery store is another good example. Those places are engineered and architectured to get people to buy as much as possible. There's a reason when you walk into the grocery store that where do you always walk into, almost always, is usually the produce section, right? And why? It kind of puts you in a good mood, right? And that's been proven. Even a walk through the woods, right, elevates moods. Human beings, we evolved in a lot of greenery and woodsy places and things like that. And and there's all kinds of vibrant colors. Things are alive in the produce section. It's the one place in the store. Just walking through it, you kind of feel good. Also, you kind of feel good about yourself as you're buying things in there, right? Almost everything in there is healthy for us. And if you load up, and buy enough lettuce and tomatoes and broccoli in the produce section, it's you don't feel so bad about throwing the fucking cookies in those middle aisles. By the way, most fitness gurus or nutritionists would sort of tell you that when you're in the grocery store, go in there with a plan, and you should probably buy as much as you can at one end of the store and the other, which is the produce usually, and then the frozen stuff, right? And just kind of target, pluck out what you need from those canyons, in the middle of those huge grocery stores we all go into now, and which is all sort of processed foods, and almost all of that's bad for us. It's also all sort of engineered to be rather delicious, as we discovered with that McDonald's piece. All right, so Duhigg in this chapter he's talking about Target. And again, and when you're working on your own research papers here too, right? Let's, asking an interesting question. There's it's basic, it's simple. There's very few things you can do that's sort of a quick, dirty tip to get to a good paper is just to ask a good question, and it's in the answering of it. And even if you don't fully answer it, sometimes this is just sort of fascinating. And again, we have the why McDonald's fries taste so good from Schwartz, right? We had the why do drug dealers steal with their moms, and it was fascinating, kind of trying to tease out the answers to those questions. And here, how does Target know what you want before you do is sort of fascinating as well, right? And a real peek into the sort of technological and computational underpinnings of the retail experience. And when we walk in that store, boy, there's already a lot of work been done to sort of tug at our attentions and to sort of lead us by the nose here or there. Again, all those things, all those impulse, everything from as simple as the impulse buys we see at the at the cashier's register to, the way I know Costco, they're constantly moving their stuff around to kind of force you to kind of walk around a lot, right? Almost remind, so you basically, they're figuring out ways to increase your exposure to more and more things, and then you get money, again, you save money on a bunch of stuff, but then you end up, seeing a few other things you like and buying them, and then spending more than you often planned going in there. So it starts again. That's the question: how they know what you want before you do. Then we get a spectacular example of that, and that is the sort of story around which much of this chapter is built, which is that. And then there's a question within the question. You have the hero of the story is sort of a man named Andrew Pohl, I think, yes, and he's a statistician, a rather talented one. And again, we like people like that, people that are really want to be good at what they do and who have a real sense of curiosity and adventure about. And again, Andrew Pohl has a job that I think a lot of people would find sort of dull and monotonous, and he really ran with it and made something of it, right? He'd become very good in other places. He'd worked for Hallmark cards and things like that, and testing, whether green or blue worked on grandma's, get well card and things like that. And when he leaped at the chance to go to Target, and why was that? Because Target is in many ways sort of the where a guy like him would most just almost drool, over working at, right? Because Target sells every fucking thing, right? And they they have an enormous, and it's just mountains of data. And out of that data, his job is to be a sort of detective and to tease out the patterns and the correlations, what things are attached to, the simple thing would be, okay, when people, when springtime, when it's, late February into March, you start seeing a lot of the lawn care stuff and things like, people, and when he gets to, late August, early September, you start seeing a lot of the, rakes and things for so those things are kind of obvious. But it's to get to all the less obvious things, and then the big question within the question is how Target knows what you want, and how they really get to answer that question is when some of the executives of Target ask him if he could figure out how women are pregnant before they tell their friends and family, even if possible. How soon can you figure out a woman is pregnant? Okay. First, why that question, right? And the answer is that, and hopefully you've already answered this in your head as you're watching me. The answer to that is that people don't change habits very often, but there are times when they're most sort of susceptible to changing habits, in a state of readiness sort of for changing habits, and that's during major life events. When there's a death, a major death in the family, going through a divorce will do this, getting married will do this, moving we'll do this. And another thing that we'll do, obviously, a real doozy is when you have a child. And I remember when I've only got one daughter, but when we had her, and I couldn't believe the amount of fucking paraphernalia that that this tiny little creature generated between the car seats and the carriage and all the food and the wipes and the diaper. Holy Christ! You really couldn't believe it. Nasal aspirators, which she hated and used to run around the house and hide on us. And anyways, when you do that, and there's several things that go on, and it's known as like sort of the holy grail of retail, because it's the ultimate time, and I guess, and they give a few reasons for this, right? Well, number one, it is just a major threshold life event. Your life is forever changed, and you are in a state of you might change other, and by other habits, you mean people rarely change what toothpaste they use or mouthwash or what's deodorant they use or whatever. And again, and we usually go either one of two ways with that. Either we just buy whatever's on sale, or we just get into we get the brand we're comfortable with, and we know, all right, maybe it's not great, but it's at least good, and I don't have to think about it, and we just get that all the time. So anyway, to get people to change in those, there's nothing you can do about the people that buy everything on sale or the items. Some people will always only buy on sale, but for the ones who've gotten into a habit of buying a particular brand, the way the easiest time to get them to change is again during one of those major life events, and especially during pregnancy. And again, especially pregnancy, because that there are lots of reasons. For it is again a threshold moment, the moment of change, but also it is you're sleep deprived. Especially if it's something for the baby, right? People will overspend and spend more than they should have in that moment, and you're just in an intense sort of state of vulnerability, even more so, I think, than maybe after you've gotten a divorce or moved or some other things. So anyway, that's what he's going after. And again, the reason he went to Target is because they just generate tons of data for a guy like him to study. It's immense. And as far as solving the pregnancy issue, and they start a baby registry, and that worked okay for a bit. But a lot of places had baby registries, and they were sort of in a competition, right? Let's see, okay. So then the question was that he was asked to solve was, can you figure out that they're pregnant before they tell anyone? And boy, what a quest that is. And listen, I don't know if we're supposed to be completely comfortable with this either, and I don't know that I am, and I'm imagining most of us aren't. And it can be a little creepy, right? With things like that. I remember the first time. I think I've told this story, but on Amazon, but way back in the late 90s, early when it was all still new, and I looked at a book on Amazon, and all of a sudden I'm just cruising around the internet looking up something else or going to another site or whatever, and I keep getting ads for that book, and it just freaked me the fuck out, man. I just thought it was so like Orwellian, and boy, you know what? It doesn't really. I've kind of gotten used to it by now, and I actually think Amazon Choice is sort of a almost like this weird digital deity that helps me make good buying choices about things I don't know a lot about, but I use it all the time. So we do get used to these, but still, people don't like boy, that is intimate, right? Knowing you're pregnant before, and then before you tell people, and we get the ultimate where you get this story of the father who comes in, yelling at them, that, what are you trying to get my daughter pregnant, right? His 15-year-old daughter was getting the pregnancy coupon packet, and, the manager sort of, apologizes profusely, gives the guy a gift card or something, and, but then, called him like a week or two later to follow up on it, and then the father says, actually, I think I owe you an apology. There was something going on in my house I didn't know about, and she's due in June, he says. And boy, holy smokes, right? I mean, they knew the girl was pregnant before her fucking father did. Boy, again, it's creepy. It's also kind of amazing. It's just sort of a shock. But so again, boy, you find something like that, Duhigg, again, that's why he's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, I guess, too. But that is a remarkable. So, and I think that's the thing he probably found first, and then he went to, all right, how do I build something around this? And it seems such a perfect example for for the book he was working on, and as far as habit goes, and then he probably came up with the how Target knows what you want and everything else. But anyway, how did they do it? And they basically it was just huge amounts of data crunching. What they did was they used that baby registry, and they just sort of reverse engineered. They just started looking at those few months before they registered for the baby, and started comparing all the products these pregnant women and girls were buying, and just finding commonalities and commonalities and commonalities. And some of them would be things you'd think of, right? Prenatal vitamins and things like that. But then some were, a lot of washcloths, right? And the big winner was they would switch to scentless creams and lotions, right? And that is brilliant, because I do it. By the way, that's how I found out I was going to become a father. My wife and I were out to dinner, and she'd gotten lobster, which she normally loves, and it came, and the smell of it was so strong, and it was like, it smelled like rotten fish almost, towards it. And she literally had to go out to the, I think I fucking wolfed down her lobster. And she had to go out to the car, and I had to like kind of scope down my food real quick, pay the bill, and then sort of rush out of there. And boy, and she was just really quiet on the way home, and about halfway home she told me to stop at CVS, and we did, and she went home, peed on the stick, came out waving it around. God, she was so pregnant, I swear the lights fucking flickered. But anyway, so there is an intense olfactory sensitivity early on. I think it's the end of the first trimester, beginning of the summer's in there. Could be the end of the second. Don't quote me on that. But anyway, that's why women switched to scentless lotion. That was the big thing they found, and why that poor father had to go through what he ended up going through. But what they do is, they figured it out, and they start sending out these their pregnancy pack. They have all different designed sort of coupon packets. But now they have one angry father. They don't want to go through that again. That's sort of, people get really turned off, right? I mean, nobody wants to, if they, young people go on spring break and STD or something, nobody wants to get those ads started, STD lotions or medications, you pop it into your news feed and stuff, right? That's, that just bothers us. So they have to figure out a way around that. And then he kind of bounces off into the whole hit record thing, right? And he comes up with a Hey Ya by Outkast, right? A huge song, I guess, in I want to say the late 90s, maybe it was the aughts, I don't remember. And it was a song that and there is a kind of a recipe to making a hit that he gets into a little bit. I'm not going to go too much into here, but there is a little bit of a recipe to making hit songs. And boy, Hey Ya scored off the charts on it. But yet, as they're playing it on Spotify and places like that, people are turning, and by the way, now they know with Pandora and Spotify and places that people listening on computers, they know when you're turning the dial and the station, right? And everybody was turning Hey Ya, so they had to figure. And basically, what it is, and by the way, if you do want to hit, what you want to do is a new twist on an old theme. That is the absolute recipe to make a hit on any kind of art, pop art, or art in general, maybe, I think. Especially pop art. I mean, art in general, like if you're a serious literature lover, you may read an experimental novel that's extremely different, even though it's extremely different. But you're talking about a real boutique sort of a clientele there. For most people, they crave familiarity, but they want things a little different. But they kind of want, it seems like, I don't know, 2/3, 3/4 familiarity, 1/3, 1/4 new. That kind of seems to be what they like. So, how did they solve the problem with Hey Ya? Was that they sandwiched it in between very familiar hit songs. And once they did that, people eventually started listening. and once they got used to, once the rear, it was too new and it was too original. Hey Ya, it was a strange, wild song, and once they that third, fourth, fifth time through, and we all know songs like this, right? You buy the record, you listen to it. There's those couple of songs you like right off the bat. Those are usually the first singles they put out, and then the deeper cuts, boy, especially as somebody you really start to like, your real favorite ends up being that second to last track, right? Or but that took a few listens for you to really start to love it. But it's a deeper, better song, and it's something like that's going on with Hey Ya, and once it got sandwiched, and then it took off and became a huge monster hit. And most of my students can sort of hum along and sing this song out loud when I point to them in class for me. So Target kind of goes to school on that, and so what they did was very simply, take the pregnancy pack. They don't have just the pregnancy pack in it, but they just sort of shuffle it in like with the lawn care stuff and the milk's on sale and bananas for the 50 cents a bunch this week or whatever, and that was how they kind of solved their problem, and their baby sales kind of went through the roof, and again, all these things are constantly happening to us, and we almost never stop to think about the way our buying purchases are being sort of pre-engineered for us. And this was, I think, a kind of fascinating look at that, and just a real interesting example of research. Just good old gumshoe sort of, right, getting on the phones, talking to the people that are there. But also, again, he does some research on things like data peddlers, right? The companies like Infographic that specialize in either combing through people's social media feeds, and whether a guy's bald or has a lot of hair or has a beard or doesn't have a beard, all those kinds of things, or whether the kinds of clothes women tend to buy. And there's literally, they comb through your social media feeds for these things, or everything you like or don't like and that kind of thing. Which is, again, that's how Facebook makes their money, right? They're selling all these things, and all kinds of the way they're engineering the stores. And everything else. So he does a lot of sort of research as well, both I'm sure online and in books. He talked to a fair amount of people as well, and he even again went to the music, a whole different industry, and discovered something there that he sort of applied. So there's a lot of smart and imaginative work being done here by Duhigg, and this is a very entertaining piece, I think, for us. All right, that is it. I will see you guys soon.